Hello and welcome to the Engerati studio. We're at EMART. It's the first time we've covered this event, but EMART is about energy trading. It's something we're covering a lot on Engerati because the whole trading ecosystem, I think, is central to the new power grid or the new energy economy that we need to have. And as my first guest in the studio, I'm joined by Jan van Aken, who's the Secretary General for IFET. So Jan, firstly, welcome. Thank you for making the time to be with us. And you just tell us a little bit about the work that IFET have done, because I think it'll provide a bit of context to what we're going to explore later on.
IFET was set up 15 years ago, mainly for the liberalization of the energy market. Maybe you remember that in the old times it was vertically integrated.
Vertically integrated utilities, yes. The world was simple, right?
And it was each region had its own, and then some people had this idea, let's do one market, open market, give free choice to the customers. That was the main driver. And that's what we lobbied strongly for, to create the legal conditions, also the changes in the law. We worked very closely with the European Commission to make it happen. We were the natural ally to do this, and I think we have been quite successful. It was in the beginning difficult to make changes because all the existing ones want to keep things as they were. But we created this group where everyone was, all the major ones were a member, and we said by working together, by giving up something on your home territory, you can gain more in the other countries. So as long as they were not losing too much in their own country too quick, they were willing to work together, and we selected from these companies the more open-minded persons to create these conditions, because they had this vision that it was possible. And we did a lot to do standardization as well and create practical things. So there was something very practical they could see where was delivered.
So you have to start a journey somewhere, but let's, in the interest of time, let's fast forward. Because most people watching this will understand and appreciate where we came from. But let's fast forward to now, and if I can ask you, say, right, okay, we've fast-tracked through this. Where are we now, and what's the work ahead?
I think many of the things that we wanted to accomplish is now being implemented. There's a lot of harmonization between what the TSOs do, because that was necessary, and that makes life easier for the traders. The danger is now that there is too much regulation, which is actually financial regulation, that has a big negative impact for the trading.
So talk to me about some of that, because when we were talking off air, you were clearly saying that financial regulation has come about for some of the right reasons, because of the banking crisis and so on, but it's impacting this trading market where actually, and these are my words, I feel that we need a speed of market that will help us to standardize and liberalize things, rather than an overburdening of regulation. So how do you see that?
There's a danger that they overdo it, and the financial crisis was not created by the commodity traders, it was the banks, but they have now definitions of derivatives that is also trading electricity forward and gas forward, and therefore it's a derivative. And therefore, if you're big, you need to be regulated as a bank. You need a bank license. There's a lot of cost involved.
So it's adding to the overhead of the trading market.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. But not only that, it's also the capital requirements. And Shell wrote that to comply with all these rules, they might need 30 billion extra capital, which they cannot use for other things. So there's one company. Can you imagine what it is for the whole industry?
So Shell needs another 30 billion of. What for? What do they need this for?
Okay, one of the things they want is mandatory clearing.
Right.
So you do a trade, and we we're in the OTC. We think you need competition. You can choose to do them on the exchange or OTC. And we had the EVET contract that two parties doing the buying and selling with each other, and you net then the difference. So I buy gas from you and you buy electricity from me, and the difference is maybe 190, so the risk is 10. So you don't need to give so much capital to the others. But now what they want...
Everything has to move.
No, if you do a trade with me for 90 and I with you for 100, then the risk is 10. But now they want you to put money in the clearing bank and I in the bank. So a lot of money from the commodity traders has to go into the banking in order to do this business. So the bank's creating the problems and they don't want systemic risk. We are now forced to put money in a few big banks. Personally, I believe you increase the systemic risk more.
But you also increase barriers to market. You also increase other new entrants coming into this market going, hang on a minute, actually I can't. Because, or
you make it more expensive.
Yeah.
And also that has an impact on liquidity, on the cost. So it's not good news. That's, and they do it with the best intentions, but it's not the right thing.
So if we say it's not good news, and whenever you have an industry saying, oh, it's not good news, it's clearly sounds like it's not good news for the industry, but can you talk a little bit about the broader ramifications? Because again, when we were talking off air, and we were covering this a little bit, a huge amount on Engerati is like, renewables are here to stay, and they bring a whole different dynamic to the whole thing. And one of the things that we've always argued about is that renewables need to move to a non-subsidy model, and trading, the market has got to find a solution. So are some of these regulations also going to have us hinder any solutions that we could bring in to the volatility that's built into the renewables market?
Some of the companies will have to deal with that as well. That's a risk. Yeah, that's another thing. Change. It's good that we get more renewables integrated in the market, and that they also are responsible for balancing. At a certain moment, these companies will have to deal with this as well. Yeah, and for instance, we want to maintain it because also for the renewable industry, it's interesting to have the right conditions, including a good working OTC market, which is lower priced than exchange trade.
And again, so the over-regulation is one of your fears coming out. So how does the market engage with the regulators? I mean, what's the dialogue that's happening with the regulators? Because I would imagine that there are two actors in the regulatory environment. I mean, I'm taking the UK now, for example. You've got the energy regulator who plays a part in all of this, and then you've got the financial regulator. And are those two talking?
They're sometimes writing also to each other on behalf of us.
Right.
We can deal very well with the energy regulator because they understand us, and it's major. We have more problems with the financial regulators that not always understand our business very well, and that's causing substantial problems. And what we do, we lobby, especially for this MiFID II. We lobby very hard. We have written letters to 6 commissioners. And
what are you saying in those letters? I mean, what are the key things, if we can bring that out, that aren't being got from that side?
One of the things we said in the current proposals, there's a danger that liquidity will go down. The offer, the price that will be
The bid
offered,
price,
bid price will
yeah.
be, the range will be larger, and the prices of energy will be higher for the consumers. And we have calculated it will cost more than 20 billion extra cost on energy only for the European consumers.
And what's that 20 billion doing? I mean, because there's a wonderful Japanese word called muda, work that adds no value. Is this money that's adding no value? It's just there because it needs to be there, or what's it going to do?
It's money that is has to be spent by the consumers for their energy that they can't use for something else.
But they're not spending it on getting energy, they're spending it on underpinning a market.
Underpinning, it's an inefficiency of the market that needs to be
So
paid.
they're subsidizing an inefficiency.
Yeah. And that's, and also, and then I'll not even talk about the costs for the bureaucracy for the energy companies, that as well. If a company needs a banking license, they need to hire a specialist, not the cheapest, just to perform according to all the rules there, because they are a bank.
So I think we've done a great job of highlighting the issues. So if I were to summarize that, and correct me if I got it, there's a potential for an efficiency crisis within the market, which will result in higher costs for the consumer because someone has to plug that gap. There is a potential for an over-regulation in the market where, as you just finished off on, companies that aren't banks need banking licenses, and therefore that increases their overheads and so on. So that is, by and large, what we could potentially look to avoid. Now, in the time that we've got left in this interview, let's imagine we could do anything we wanted. What would you do? If someone put you in charge, Jan, and said, off you go, solve it for us. Can you just paint a picture of what that solution would look like, and how also to us? But let's start with that. What would that solution look like?
I would let the financial regulators regulate the banks and let them do a better job there, because I don't think they have done, and they are doing, and leave the energy industry regulated by the energy regulators. So create the conditions that any serious energy company should fall outside the financial regulation.
But do you not see the fear as to why, and let's not forget the third actors in this game, the politicians, the potential fear of that is that we would get a trading scandal like we've had in the financial world in the energy sector. And people would say, well, surely that is about money, not about electrons. So why didn't the finance sector pick this up? And you can just see the headlines being written. Can you say that the energy regulator is absolutely capable of, I mean, there's no such thing as 100% fail-safe, but making sure that that sort of thing can't happen?
If there's a major problem in the energy industry, suppose a major one goes bankrupt, then the consumers will still get their electricity and their gas. You saw that when Enron went bankrupt. So what is the crisis? Let the market decide themselves, and if they don't do a good job, they go bust, but we will continue. It's different with the bank, where the consumers, ultimately the taxpayer, have to bail out the banks. And they should organize that better, who should pay for it. And if they do a bad job, let the bank then go bankrupt. But let the energy sector take care of itself, and that will make sure that they do a good job.
And do you feel that if you start creating, or if you actually draw a harder wall between the two things and say, look, this is the energy sector, look at it differently. Trading within the energy sector is trading within the energy sector, regulated by all means, but let it be done by people who really understand the energy sector, because there's a whole different dynamic in the energy sector. At the end of the day, it's the ultimate consumable, right? As soon as power is generated, you've got to use it. Do you think that environment would actually accelerate the solution to some of the other issues which I mentioned at the top of the interview, which is about how do we build a world where we can economically deliver renewables without subsidies and feed-in tariffs and and ridiculous 10-year power purchase agreements, for example?
I think so, because it will be done then in the most efficient way and the cost will be low. And if it's simple, you get new entrants, especially on the renewables, it's many new entrants that can fit in a system that is more simple and not expensive. You get more actors, more competition, and it's a lot of cost savings. And I think that's in the interest, I think, for the consumers, for whole of Europe, in that way. So actually, what the politicians do is I'm not so enthusiastic about some of the things. They do it with the best intentions, like systemic risk. It sounds very nice, but if you see the solutions, I personally believe it's creating more systemic risk, and it creates less good conditions for the market.
Can I just, as we finish off, you said it creates more systemic risk. Can you just tell me a little bit more about what that systemic risk looks like? More systemic risk, again, your words, but what is the danger of it?
Now, the thing, you're putting a lot of money in a few clearing banks. So instead of the risk being spread by all the actors in the industry, you force all the actors. So you don't have a distributed environment,
you've got a centralized.
In a few clearing banks, and so you put more eggs in a few baskets, and you call then that you have less systemic risk. I think on the contrary, and it's like the commodity industry now have to put money in the banking world, while it was caused by the banks and not by the commodity industry overall.
I see the problem, and I think that's a perfect place to end it. Jan, thank you very much for making the time, and thank you for watching as well. I hope you enjoyed this overview of what's happening in the energy trading world. Very insightful, and Jan, thanks again for taking the time.
Thanks.